continue this presentation on the application of Gibbs phase rule. As you all know, changes in phase are an integral part of our life. The melting of glaciers, the melting of ice, for example, in ice cream, the evaporation of water, evaporation of coffee and tea, all involve changes in phase. And at one stage or the other, an equilibrium is achieved between the substances in two different phases. So what are the parameters that affect the change of phase? How do we control these parameters? And how do we use them to our advantage? These and other things can be understood by applying some simple aspects of thermodynamics to such a heterogeneous equilibrium. Remember that the Gibbs phase rule has enormous applications, particularly in the field of material science, for it encompasses the extraction of metals, the purification of metals, the conversion of metals to metal alloys, conversion of simple liquid state to the liquid crystal state, which is finding great applications in day-to-day life. So also, we come across applications of Gibbs phase rule even in far-flung areas like geochemistry, where the mechanism of formation of rocks can be predicted by using this phenomenon. So in short, we'll be very much interested in knowing the conditions under which a phase equilibrium develops and how to manipulate this equilibrium to our advantage. Gibbs, who is otherwise well known for the concept of the free energy, hit upon this idea of phase rule way back in 1875, and he published his paper giving the title not as phase equilibrium but as heterogeneous equilibrium. Perhaps because of this, his publication went unnoticed for almost 25 years. Be as it may, at the turn of the century, chemists across the world started paying closer attention to his ideas. Gibbs phase rule is a simple mathematical equation, and using this simple mathematical equation, we can apply the principles of thermodynamics to the heterogeneous phases. The rule given by Gibbs is simple enough, and as you can see, it is a linear relationship between three variables, namely F, C and P. And if you are wondering what they are nothing but the number of phases, number of components, and the number of degrees of freedom that a system at equilibrium enjoys. And the Gibbs rule helps us to understand the number of degrees of freedom by knowing the number of phases and components which are at equilibrium. We will now understand these terms in some detail. Let us now try to understand the meaning of the term phase. Of course, we are not all too unfamiliar with this word. We speak of the solid phase, the liquid phase, and the vapor or the gaseous phase of a substance. But what precisely do we mean by a phase in the context of a system at equilibrium? In a many-phase system, we specifically refer to a part of the system as a phase which fulfills the following criterion. One, it has to be homogeneous. Second, it has to be separated from other parts by means of a distant boundary, and therefore it should be mechanically separable from other parts. Let us now consider some examples to drive the point home. If you consider a pure substance, for example, pure water, it is one single phase. Remember that we are ignoring the vapor associated with any liquid here, and therefore considering pure water to consist only of one phase. Similarly, if you take a mixture of two liquids, a mixture of two liquids may either be miscible or immiscible. If the two liquids are miscible, they form one single phase, and if they are immiscible, they form more than one phase. Here is an example where I have shown three liquids which are immiscible with one another, forming three phases. A mixture of solids, however intimate, should be considered as different phases. This is a photograph of coal powdered and mixed with rock salt. However intimately we powder them, rock salt and coal form two different phases. A mixture of two or three solids is considered as one phase if it forms an alloy, because alloy is a chemically distinct species. Here is another example where we take
a system consisting of calcium carbonate, calcium oxide, and carbon dioxide in a closed system. Here, calcium carbonate is a solid, calcium oxide is also a solid, but carbon dioxide is a gas. Since two solids are to be considered as two different phases, the total number of phases are not two, but rather three. Let us now turn our attention to the second term, namely the component. And since there is a bit of confusion always involved as to what a component really means, we will straight away take a couple of illustrative examples. Consider the ethanol water system. As we have already seen, ethanol and water are miscible in each other in the liquid phase. However, the liquid phase itself is associated with the vapor phase, and therefore there are two phases, namely the liquid phase and the vapor phase. Each phase is made up of two chemical constituents, namely C2H5OH and H2O. These distinct chemical entities are given the name constituents. So, the composition of each phase, that is, the composition of the liquid phase and the composition of the vapor phase, can be specified by using two constituents, namely ethanol and water. In other words, the minimum number of constituents required to describe the composition of each phase is 2. If you use the two formulae C2H5OH and H2O, you should be able to describe the composition of both the liquid phase as well as the vapor phase. And therefore we conclude that the number of components is not 1 but rather 2. Let us now take another familiar example which we have already seen, namely the decomposition of calcium carbonate to give solid calcium oxide and carbon dioxide. As we know, there are three phases, two solid phases and one gaseous phase. There are three constituents represented by three distinct chemical species, CaCO3, CaO and CO2. At first look, it appears that to describe the composition of each phase and totally of all the three phases, we require three constituents. But let us now see how to describe the composition of the calcium carbonate phase, the calcium oxide phase, and the carbon dioxide phase by randomly choosing any two constituents out of three. For example, let us choose calcium carbonate and carbon dioxide. The composition of calcium carbonate phase can be described by writing the equation calcium carbonate plus 0 CO2. Similarly, the composition of the calcium oxide phase can be described by the equation CaCO3 minus CO2. And lastly, the composition of the CO2 phase can be written as 0 CaCO3 plus CO2. Please notice that we are using only two constituents, although there are three constituents involved. So by employing only two constituents and by adding them, subtracting them and using this number 0, we are able to account for the composition of each and every phase. Therefore, the number of components of the calcium carbonate system is not 3 but rather 2. We say that it is a two-component system. So how do we formally define a component? A component is the smallest number of independently variable constituents using which the composition of each phase can be expressed either directly when the substance is pure or in the form of an equation which involves a negative sign and zero signs also. If you have understood my explanation of the two previous examples, then I will throw at you two more systems and ask you to calculate the number of components involved. The first is a very familiar system to chemists, namely the sodium sulfate water system. Here, the number of chemical species and also the number of phases involved run like this. Sodium sulfate, of course, the two hydrates, sodium sulfate 7H2O, sodium sulfate 10H2O, ice, which is the solid phase of water, the solution containing sodium sulfate dissolved in water, and of course the vapor phase associated with the solution. So I leave it open to you to work out how many components are there to describe this particular system. Remember, you need to calculate the minimum number of constituents required to describe the composition of all those phases that I have mentioned now. Another example I throw at you is the equilibrium system involving ammonium chloride with ammonia and HCl, which is quite familiar to us in day-to-day laboratory. Again, this is analogous to the calcium carbonate system, and therefore I'm already throwing a hint at you that although the number of constituents involved are 3, you can manipulate the number of constituents in such a way that the number of components is not 3 but less. We now ask ourselves how to describe or define the state of a system. The system that we are referring to may be a pure substance. It may consist of one or multi-phases, or it may consist of many components involving multi-phases. Whatever the case may be, we are interested in describing the state of a system in terms of certain physically observable quantities like temperature, pressure, composition, magnetic field, etc. This brings us to a very important term, namely the degrees of freedom that a system enjoys. In order to specify a particular state of a system, we need to mention the values of certain independent variables like temperature and pressure. We will illustrate the concept of degrees of freedom with an example. Consider a typical two-phase system comprising of liquid and water vapor. Here, liquid or water is in equilibrium with its own vapor. Now, we all know that the boiling point of water at 1 atmosphere pressure is 100 degrees Celsius. The moment I specify the pressure as 1 atmosphere, the temperature is automatically fixed, and vice versa. If I change the atmospheric pressure in an open vessel, automatically the boiling temperature also changes. In other words, for a two-phase system at equilibrium, specifying one variable is enough to fix the value of the other variable, and therefore the number of degrees of freedom that this system enjoys is not 2 but only 1, and therefore it is said to be a monovariant system. Contrast this with a pure substance like ice or pure water. Here, for a given value of pressure, the system can have many temperatures, or for a given temperature, the system may have many values of pressure without losing its phase. Hence, for a pure substance consisting of only one phase, the number of degrees of freedom is not 1 but rather 2, and therefore we say that such a system is supposed to be bivariant. I hope you are noticing that as we increase the number of phases, as we go from one phase to two phases, the degrees of freedom is not actually increasing but rather decreasing. In other words, the increase in the number of phases is decreasing the number of independent variables which can be used to describe the state of a system. I leave it open to you to ponder as to what the degrees of freedom will be when three phases are in equilibrium with one another. Of course, we'll discuss this in a few minutes, but at the back of your mind, this question should be apparent and should be running. Let us now formally describe what degrees of freedom means. It is simply the minimum number of intensive variables like temperature, pressure, composition, etc., which has to be specified in order to describe the state of a system completely. The very objective of phase rule is to calculate and predict the number of degrees of freedom that a system enjoys. This in turn depends on two parameters. One is the number of phases, the other is the number of components. And this we will discuss for a one component system and a two-component system involving many phases in the examples to come.
Having studied the meaning of the terms F, C and P, we are now actually ready to use the phase rule. I will not be deriving the phase rule, but remember that phase rule is derived on the basis of three key aspects. One, that a system at equilibrium means that every phase has the same temperature. Second, every phase also has the same pressure. And three, the chemical potential of every component in every phase is the same. You will of course be wondering what is the meaning of the word chemical potential. Chemical potential simply gives us the measure of the change in Gibbs free energy with the composition of that particular component. Suppose we have two components A and B, then the chemical potential of A is given by dou G by dou Na, and the chemical potential of B is given by dou G by dou Nb, where Na and Nb are the number of moles of A and B in the mixture. In short, whatever be the number of phases and whatever be the number of components, the chemical potential of each component in every phase should be the same. And when this is applied, we hit upon the famous Gibbs rule, F is equal to C minus P plus 2.
Let us now consider the application of Gibbs phase rule to a one-component system, and we do this by the means of what is called as the phase diagram, which describes the variation of pressure or temperature or any other variable and its effect on the various phases. And we do so by considering the most familiar example, namely the water system. You clearly see that there are three phases: ice, water and water vapor. There are three lines and each line indicates a two-phase equilibria and a point called as the triple point where the three lines intersect. And we consider the water system in detail. We realize that whenever the water is present in the pure phase, as in liquid water, water vapor or solid ice, the number of degrees of freedom is 2 because the number of phases is 1, and according to phase rule F becomes 2, which means that for a given temperature the water vapor can have various pressures. Similarly, for a given pressure, solid ice, for example, can have various temperatures, stating that F is equal to 2. However, when you consider any of the three lines, clearly there is a two-phase equilibrium involved between solid and liquid, liquid and water vapor, or water vapor and solid. And therefore, for any of the solid, the number of degrees of freedom turns out to be 1 and the system is monovariant, which means that for a given value of pressure, the temperature is fixed, or for a given temperature, the pressure is fixed. We further see that these three lines intersect at the point O, which is called the triple point of water. This triple point of water has the degrees of freedom equal to 0. What does this imply? This shows that the triple point of water is a point where liquid water, water vapor and solid ice can coexist in equilibrium only at a given temperature and at a particular pressure. And this temperature and pressure is characteristic of this particular system. And you can see that pressure and temperatures are different for different systems. It is possible to cool liquid water below its freezing point without the separation of ice. This state is what is called as the state of metastable equilibrium of water. When you look at the three curves OA, OB and OC, you see the effect of pressure on respectively the boiling temperature, the sublimation temperature and the fusion temperatures. It is interesting to note that the curve OC is bending to the left, which means that the melting temperature of ice decreases when the pressure is increased. This is very odd because, generally speaking, the melting temperature of a solid increases with increase of pressure. But ice is different because it has an open cage-like structure with lesser volume, or rather higher volume and lesser density. Whereas when ice becomes liquid water, the volume will decrease. The decrease in volume is favored by an increase of pressure. thereby leading to a decrease in the freezing point. Another utility of the phase diagram is to see the effect of variation of temperature or pressure on the change of phase. For example, we keep the pressure fixed at 1 atmosphere, keep on varying the temperature from left to right, starting from point X. The temperature keeps on increasing, reaches the point Y, liquid will start separating, the number of phases will now become 2, and therefore the number of degrees of freedom becomes 1. Temperature cannot increase without the change of pressure, and therefore the temperature is forced to be fixed constant until all the ice becomes water. Now, once again, the number of degrees of freedom becomes 2 because the phases becomes 1. The temperature increases at a constant pressure until the point Z is reached, when all liquid water boils off to become the water vapor at a constant temperature. And again, when all the water has become liquid water has vaporized, the number of degrees of freedom increases to 2. This elegantly illustrates the application of phase diagram and phase rule on the phase equilibria of the water system. We now consider quickly the carbon dioxide system, whose features are very similar to that of water, except in the fact that the curve OD, which gives the melting temperature curve, slides to the right, indicating that the melting temperature increases with increase of pressure. It is also interesting to note that the triple point of carbon dioxide exists at 5.1 atmosphere. Therefore, solid carbon dioxide and liquid CO2 can coexist only at 5.1 atmosphere. Hence, at 1 atmosphere, when you bring the temperature down to minus 78.5 degrees, the carbon dioxide gas will directly solidify without the appearance of the liquid phase, and hence the name dry ice. Another system that we consider is the sulfur system, which shows allotropy. Both rhombic sulfur and monoclinic sulfur will exist, along with the liquid sulfur and sulfur vapors. You can see quickly the various lines corresponding to the two-phase equilibria, the point B, C, E representing the three triple points, and the dashed lines showing the metastable states of equilibrium. Let us now try to apply the Gibbs rule to a two-component system. In a two-component system, when C is equal to 2, the minimum number of phases can be 1, and even then the number of degrees of freedom will be 3, which means that 3 variables are required to plot our phase diagram, which will look something like this. In order to avoid 3D diagrams, we keep one of the variables constant, let us say pressure, so that the number of degrees of freedom is now reduced to 2. In a general case, for two-component systems, the phase rule is given as C minus P plus 1 rather than C minus P plus 2. Thus, we manipulate the conditions by keeping one variable constant so that we plot two variables and get two-dimensional phase diagrams. In what follows, we will keep the pressure constant and vary temperature and composition. And there are in fact two types of two-component systems: those in which the components are completely miscible in the liquid state, and those in which they are immiscible. Among those which are miscible, there are those which form immiscible solids. For example, lead-silver system, cadmium bismuth system, and a salt water system like Ki and water are all examples where the solid phase will not mix with one another. There are others where in a solid state they form an additional compound by reacting with one another, like magnesium zinc, which forms MgZn2, ferric chloride water, which forms many hydrates, and sodium sulfate water, which also forms many hydrates. We will now consider a typical example of two components which completely mix with one another in the liquid phase. Let us say we start with a mixture of liquid A and B. Imagine I'm starting here with about 80% of A and 20% of B, and I start reducing the temperature. As I reduce the temperature, the composition remains unchanged until the point B is reached. At B, the solid A will start separating out because our liquid is richer in A. So as the solid A starts separating out, the number of phases will become 2, and therefore the number of degrees of freedom will be 1. Now further cooling will be accompanied by a change in composition along the line BC. So as I keep cooling my mixture or liquid solution, more and more of solid A will separate out until the point C is reached. At the point C, both the solid A and solid B will separate out from the liquid solution. In fact, the entire liquid solution will freeze to give solid A and solid B with the same composition. Imagine, just for the sake of argument, that the composition of the liquid at this point is 50-50. Then the entire liquid will freeze, giving a mixture of 50% solid A and 50% solid B. Similarly, suppose you start from the other extreme with 80% of B and about 20% of A and start cooling. Until the point B dash is reached, there is only one phase. But here, the solid B will also start separating out, and as solid B separates out, the number of degrees of freedom will be reduced to 1. The temperature further decreases, accompanied by a decrease in the composition, as more and more of solid B will separate out. At the point C, as we have already seen, the liquid mixture will completely freeze and give solid A and solid B of the same composition. This particular point, as you can see, is the minima of the graph, the minimum point in the graph, and it corresponds to one particular composition and one particular temperature. In other words, the number of degrees of freedom enjoyed here is just 0. This point is called as the eutectic point and represents the minimum freezing point of the liquid solution or the minimum melting point of the solid mixture. Eutectic in Greek simply means easy melting, and therefore for any composition of two liquids, the composition C represents the lowest possible freezing point or the lowest possible melting point. Now the same thing can be understood in terms of the rate of cooling that one can achieve. Suppose we start from the point A. As we go from point A to point B, the cooling is rather rapid, but at point B, solid A will start separating out. Separation of solid solid A is a exothermic process, so the rate of cooling will be slowed down until the point C is reached. At the eutectic point, the temperature has to remain constant, so therefore you see that the rate of cooling has stopped and the temperature remains constant. This continues until all the solid A and solid B has frozen into the eutectic composition, and further cooling will obviously happen with time. The cooling diagram is very important because it enables us to detect the eutectic point. The eutectic point corresponds to the constant temperature in this particular graph. A typical example is the lead-silver system, in which the eutectic lies with a composition of 2.6% silver and the rest being lead. Remember, this is the basis of the desilverization of lead and the enrichment of the lead alloy by Patterson's process. Eutectics, of course, play a very important role in our daily lives. The solder that we use is actually an alloy of tin and lead with a eutectic composition with a melting range of about 180 degrees Celsius. Similarly, when we try to melt the ice that is deposited in the roads, we are using the principle that a mixture of salt and ice form a eutectic composition with a melting point or freezing point of minus 21.1 degrees Celsius. The temperature prevailing on the roads is generally much higher than this, and therefore melting can happen much more easily at a higher temperature. The same principle can be applied by mixing salt and ice under adiabatic conditions, so that the cooling of ice and salt mixture will happen to a very low temperature of the order of minus 20 degrees Celsius.
Thus, in this video, we have seen the application of Gibbs phase rule to simple equilibria involving one component and two component systems, which themselves may encompass 1, 2, or 3 phases. We have also seen that as the number of phases changes, the number of degrees of freedom decreases. We have also appreciated the application of phase rule in very many areas. This is just a very brief attempt at understanding the phase diagram using the phase rule. I hope that by listening to this video lecture, you are able to appreciate the application of thermodynamic principles to a chemical system which is a heterogeneous system involving many phases. Thank you for your patience.